when you can care more about the success of someone on your team, you care more about their wins, that's when you know you're becoming a coach. And I had a few of those moments early on. I've been working at the same software company, Seismic, for the last 8 years. I've had almost every role imaginable. I started as a sales intern, a BDR, then a BDR manager, and an AE, and now I currently serve as a AE manager and RVP at sales at Seismic, if you will. And I mean, my philosophy changes in every single role, right? It's like when you're at a high growth technology company, everything's changing on the fly, and the only thing that's consistent is change. So I think with all those roles of I've figured out from different people and, different opportunities, how to take those responsibilities, make it my own, and try to be the best that I can be. Because as you know, all those roles are so different.
Good point. Okay. The length of tenure is definitely an interesting one. As we know, length of tenure in sales is decreasing, something like 18 months and going down. But as sales leaders, of course, we want our reps to stick around, right? Like, we want to be that type of sales leader, and we want experienced hands on our team. What's been it for you, Will, that's made you so excited about Seismic, the people there, the reason you stayed, and what can sales leaders do to encourage that in their own reps?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few things, and something that I did really early on, and it was advice that I got from a mentor of mine in college, was to find a board of directors. So what I mean by that is mentors that I have, whether it's sales or trying to build my professional brand and, move my way up, just people who I can constantly go to for advice and talk about what's going on at Seismic or outside of Seismic, and how I can get better, make more money, or, improve my mental health and all that stuff. And one of the best mentors I ever had helped me realize really early on how amazing the opportunity was at Seismic. Just the funding that we got, the leaders, the product, the vision, and so when I joined and I saw all that and I stuck around, I was moved into a leadership role pretty fast, and I had to figure out, how I could take my roles, my responsibilities, and sort of make that leadership role my own. And really, it was relying on those other people. It was my original bosses. It's Ed Callanan, who's my CRO and one of my biggest mentors ever, and constantly going to them for advice, putting time on their calendar. What'd you do when this happens? I'm thinking about doing XYZ. What do you think about that? And also just building a culture and a brand and an opportunity where people know that they can grow in their career similar to where I did, and have fun while doing it. I think, the mental health aspect is such a huge component. The learning, the growth, teaching people the game of what I call 3D chess. There's so much that goes into it. You got to rely on other people, and you got to make it fun. And I think that's resonating with my reps.
Okay, awesome. That's really cool. I wanted to touch on that point of assuming leadership positions super quick. It's why a lot of people love to get into tech sales, because that's possible. At the same time, the speed at which that happens can be a challenge. You said there, asking for advice, putting time on the calendar, big ways you deal with it. But on a more personal level, Will, like when you stepped into that first leadership position before most folks normally would, talk to me about that journey of change, transition, and growing up really quickly, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I'd never been more nervous about anything in my entire life, right? It's like you come from the fields. I'd done, several years as an individual contributor. I started getting really good at it. I figured it out, and I figured out how to manage my patch the right way, and the resources and all that, what it takes in enterprise sales to close those big deals and be effective. And it had been a while since I'd been in a coaching or a mentoring role. I'd been a BDR manager, but it's just so much different. And, I took over a team of 8 and, had to step right in and, try to find them some quick wins, try to establish my credibility, try to be fun, try to be upbeat, really get to know them and help them, make their patch their own and do all that stuff. And, for me, never being in that role of responsibility, I went back to my mentors. I went to the Eds of the world, some of the different SVPs, some of the successful RVPs, some of my, friends and colleagues who are managers at other companies, just like, what'd you do when you started out? What's some of the best advice that you have for me? And then 3, 6 months in, what should I be thinking about? And it's pretty constant. What I heard and what everyone told me to do is to listen. And whether that's like listening to calls or, getting their feedback, where are they at in the year? What are their professional goals? Where do they want to be? What does growth look like to them? And starting to be able to help them across that journey and figuring out where their quick wins are and helping them there. That's been awesome. I've been a part of, a growing company, and some leaders come in and kind of tell you what to do and say, this is my way of doing things. And, this is what I've been successful with. And they try to incorporate that in. I've had more of an approach where I've learned from my experiences. This is my playbook, make it your own. And, how can I help you get to where you need to be and close as many deals as possible?
Okay, that's awesome, because if I imagine myself being in that position, I can imagine the temptation is you're in a new position. Maybe you don't feel totally confident or comfortable yet. Maybe there's a temptation there to be more directive. But clearly you battled against that. You found a different way of doing it. Did you ever find the two in a juxtaposition or in an interplay, or did you ever have to hold back on being more prescriptive at times? And how have you come to this final like approach and way of doing it?
100%. And you learn from experience, where I think it was cool when I first took over the responsibility and I had been a highly effective AE. So I could join calls and, talk to those revenue leaders, and we sell to CROs and CMOs, and they could just see the way that I communicate and whatnot. And some of the best advice came from my boss, our SVP of sales. She was listening to a few of our gong calls. She's like, "Will, you got to stop being the rep." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" She's like, you tend to like take over some of their calls. It's like, you need to let them go. And, it's not about you anymore. It's about them. And like, we know that you can sell, seismic, but you got to be more of a coach, stop being the rep. And hearing that was totally helpful for me. I like went back and re-listened to those calls. It was like, man, you're right. Like I absolutely like was, taking over or whatnot. And some of the advice that she had for me too is like, once you can put away all the individual, like whether it's accolades or, we come up with things called push pins when we come up with big wins, and the rep gets to write that out. And I really miss that. But when you can care more about the success of someone on your team, and, you care more about what they get to write in their push pins, and you care more about their wins, that's when you're becoming a coach. And I had a few of those moments early on where it's just like, when it works and you're helping them and they're talking about how amazing and life-changing those deals were, there's nothing like that as a frontline leader.
Okay. So we changed what we're attached to, from getting the outcome to letting the rep get the outcome and the success.
Exactly. But I think at first it was kind of good for me to be on a lot of those calls, right? And they could hear how I'm communicating and what my message is. And a lot of my leaders did that for me when I first started out. And you kind of got to take those training wheels off and be more behind the scenes and help them at that point. Because at a certain point in time, you're managing 8-10 people and you can't join every call. It's like, you got to do more strategy behind the scenes, help them quarterback the resources the right way. And that was a big learning curve, but I'm still working on that. She constantly reminds me to stop being the rep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I can understand that temptation. So lots of what we discussed here is great. It's tactical stuff. It's helping our reps. It's looking in the weeds, which is awesome. But as you've gone through many layers of sales leadership, I imagined you started to look at some more strategic, cross-functional stuff as well. And I'm really interested how individual contributors who are executors face that change to being more strategic and thinking higher level. How was that for you?
Yeah, the best example I can give, some of the best advice I ever got was like, no matter what function you're in, you got to treat this sales, occupation as 3D chess. And what he meant by that is there's so many different avenues to enterprise sales to help you progress a deal. There's so many things at our arsenal, whether it's, being able to utilize different technologies like the gongs of the world and the seismic and the Salesforce and, all those things at our fingertips, as well as like our internal partners and resources and the quarterbacking it takes to be an individual contributor. right? There's so much that goes into in that 3D chess where it's like you're almost the CRO of your own book of business as an individual contributor. There's definitely a big learning curve when you become a manager where you're now the CRO of that book of business, which is like the, accounts that you have in your patch and your 8 AEs. So I always think about at all times, like what do I have at my fingertips, the teammates, the resources, the people, how can I progress every single one of those deals by playing 3D chess and be the best CRO of my own business. And I constantly think about that in the back of my head. It's like, I'm my own personal CRO. I might be an RVP of sales, but my VP has given me so much flexibility to really lean and dig in on my tools and resources and make that my own. And it's super fun.
Okay. So there's not necessarily a distinction between strategy as a leader and strategy as a rep, because we're always thinking about our business strategically and what's there and who we can pull in.
Exactly. And when you're a rep, it's just like, how do you help that individual be the best CRO of their own book of business? Yeah. Now you're just doing that 8 times across something a little bit broader. So spot on. Yeah, and nice. It's just the best analogy that I got from one of my old leaders.
Cool. Something to come onto here then is data and sales leadership. What does data mean to you, Will, and what's the main value you get out of it?
I have learned to love data more than anyone. I think it's, amazing. And I use it a lot as an individual contributor, but even more as a manager. And when I started sales 8 years ago, it like didn't even exist, right? What we were doing, I was working at a startup, right? I was given a laptop and said, hey, here you go. Like go call people and sell. And there's so much data nowadays that has completely changed sales, where I see sellers more as, coaches more than ever, because the buyers today typically know what they want. They can do as much research as they want online on the different competitors or what's out there. And you're really just coaching them through their buyer's journey to help them get to where they need to be. So when I think about data, I think about business cases, right? Like how can we quantify the value to help them reach their decision, select my product and go from there. I also think about data as, the different amazing tools out there like 6 Sense and Gong that I'm using every day to be able to understand like who's ready to buy. And then if they are ready to buy, like reviewing the game film and being able to see, what my rep did well, what didn't go well, how can we progress that deal and opportunity? Like there's so much data everywhere that if you're not using data as a seller today, you're way far behind. So it's like trying to figure out what the best tools are for your business and how to use those every day to help your team do better.
Okay. I like that line. If you're not using data in sales today, you're far behind. Now, lots of listeners of the blog are people in RevOps and sales ops, and they're desperately trying to get their reps to use data. It'd be great to hear from a sales leader, former rep, on what makes you engage with a piece of data. Like what makes that easy to action, to read, to digest, to understand, that they could think about when they're trying to help their own leaders with data pieces and analysis.
Yeah, I'll use the example of like how we've matured as an organization. And, we rarely used to look underneath the hood at activity, like how many calls are we making a day, how many emails, how many meetings and opportunities. And we cared a lot about obviously revenue and how many deals that you're bringing in. But when we started to get really prescriptive and we grew up as an organization and we really dug into that stuff and we built out our enablement function to start to try to, coach our BDRs, our AEs, our frontline managers to, hey, here's your activity. We need it to be here. Here's what's being said in the field. We need us to be saying X, Y, Z. Here's the content that's been really successful. And here's what we think you should be using because of that. That's where I think we've really, taken our sales approach to the next level. And there's so many amazing tools out there that everyone can use, whether you're a seller, marketing, sales operations and whatnot. It's like, you got to figure out which of those tools are best for your individual stack. And then how can you get everyone to just buy in? Like, we got to use this data because it's going to make us be so much better. So I think part of it's like, you find the stack, you find time to devote the technology, but you find an enablement function or like a training team that's really going to, devote the time, energy, and resources to make the most of those investments. to make sure everyone's on the same page and really holding each other accountable.
Okay, that's awesome. I want to take something specific you said there, which is, speaking to a rep, we can be prescriptive into what they need to do, the actions, activities to hit target. To play devil's advocate, what people sometimes struggle with the reps, you say, well, this doesn't apply to me. I'm more experienced, I'm less experienced, I close or win deals this way, that way. I'm different, right? So I'm really interested to hear how you make, how you sell like an individual case by case basis on the data. So people buy into it and they don't think it doesn't apply.
Yeah, it's a great question and I love it. And I think, as a manager, you got to adapt to every seller style. Like, I have so many different A players on my team who are just wired completely differently. And I love them to death for everything that they're really good at. Like one is, I'll even throw out the term like nerd. Like he is the most amazing, like data, math, whatnot person. And like, that's his game. And then I have someone on my team who she's the most phenomenal relationship person, but doesn't really understand the math background or whatnot that he's putting together in business cases or whatnot. So I think a big part of it's adapting to your individual contributors and helping meet them where they need to be, but also letting them know, like, what's the bigger initiative here? Like, I need to care about data in this process because my SVP really needs to know what's going on at the organization, because my CRO really needs to like have these data points down and be able to tell our board what's going on. So I'm like, guys, I know that this is like a pain that we're digging into some of this stuff. And I know you've done stuff a certain way, but Ed really needs this to, tell the board that we're hitting these metrics and doing X, Y, Z. If you can make it bigger than like the individual in our team, I've seen that be really effective. And I think they understand like the greater good into why we need to promote this change to make us better.
That's awesome. And that links well to your beginning piece, which is getting the buy-in and the belief in the mission. I can imagine those two things work quite well hand in hand.
Yeah, totally. And it's all top down too. It's like, I've the most amazing CRO in the game. And like my boss, who's an SVP, I think is one of the most phenomenal sales leaders out there as well. And I've taken bits and pieces from their game, but like I take down their messaging down to my team. So it's like, one goal, one mission type stuff where it's not like, hey, this is how I do sales. Like we're going to do this. It's more like, hey, we need to do this as a team because these are the expectations and goals at the top. And this is what's being translated, and let's go.
Awesome. That's great. Okay. Well, final question for you then. If you're in a room full of the best sales leaders ever, what would you ask them?
Oh man, you're putting the best sales leaders ever. So is this people that I've worked with before, or just like people who I really admire?
Yeah. Yeah. Whoever. Yeah.
Man, I wasn't expecting this one. You're catching me off guard, Tom.
That's okay.
I think as a sales leader, something that I'm always trying to do is accumulate as much wealth as possible. But something that I think about in my professional career is like, how can I help people? It's like, whether it's through sales or growing their occupation, or like helping a BDR become an AE, or helping an intern find a job. It's like, I think that's more valuable than any unit monetary you can put on anything. And I'm extremely passionate about. So if I was to ask the most successful salesperson of all time, it's like, how'd you help the most people? What'd you do outside of sales to build something as special as you did to make $1 zillion? Maybe that's Bezos or whoever the best seller is of all time. Like, what was most influential outside of sales to help the most people possible? And how'd you get that done?